Outlined against a blue-gray October sky, the four horsemen rode again. In dramatic lore, they are known as famine, pestilence, destruction, and death. These are only aliases. Their real names are Stoldrare, Miller, Crowley, and Layden. We are none of those, but welcome to the show. It's IB Countdown to Kickoff, Notre Dame and Army, along with Jesse Stiers. I'm Sean Stiers. He, as always, comes to you from Cleveland, but he is very festive looking with all kinds of Irish gear on today. I am in Los Angeles and like a stone's throw from the Crypto.com Center where the Lakers play. I was strolling among the statues today of the Laker greats as I strolled outside the hotel earlier today. I'm, of course, in LA because there's a big matchup, Notre Dame women's basketball, coming up Saturday afternoon, 4 o'clock Eastern time. 5th ranked Notre Dame, 3rd ranked USC. Should be a lot of fun. How are you today, Jesse?
Well, I can't complain because it is Friday. The weekend is starting.
But I might.
I've got some stressors going on, but it's the weekend. It's time to kind of put all that behind me and have a good day. It's pretty bleak, though. Weather is crappy. It's dark. It's cold. It's rainy. It's probably going to be icy and snowy. So good weekend to kind of lay low and watch football, and that's exactly what I plan to do.
Absolutely. You guys got the snow last night there in Cleveland. I've actually got the replay up right now on NFL Network. I flipped it on and I was like, when's this snow coming? Because the whole first half there were just like a couple flakes, and then now it's the second half and there's snow all over the place.
Yeah, just wait till you get to the fourth quarter. It's like a snow globe.
Yeah, that's exactly where it is right now, early in the fourth quarter, and there's just snow everywhere. Well, we've got a lot to get to in this show. Of course, we started off with the Four Horsemen because it's Notre Dame and Army, and it's the 100-year anniversary of the Four Horsemen. We'll touch on that a little bit later in the show, but I wanted to start with this. Last week we talked about Virginia Senior Day kind of being a trap game type setting for the Fighting Irish, considering this week's game against an unbeaten Army team, a ranked Army team, and next week the football team, of course, travels right out here to where I am right now in Los Angeles to take on Southern Cal to close the regular season. I mean, the Irish obviously won last week, Jesse, but did it feel like maybe some of those trap game vibes might have got them for a little bit?
No, I don't think that some trap game vibes got to them. And I think what's really difficult is when you're mentally preparing for a game and then something happens like that opening kickoff where you immediately kind of take the momentum away. I think that kind of decreases the adrenaline a little bit, right? Because you're so amped up to play so well, and then you get a break at the beginning.
It's almost a letdown.
Yeah, it's almost a letdown, like a competitive letdown. And so again, I think that score, getting that easy score, I think takes away some of that like foot on the gas type situation, or maybe some of that pressure to have a perfect opening drive or to get out early because it's already taken care of for you essentially, right? And so I'm not saying that this is definitely why there might have been a slow start, but to me that's what makes the most logical sense. Is it's like when I remember playing in high school and we had a big opponent in our first series, we got a pick six and it immediately kind of swayed the momentum and kind of took that, and as a defense it takes that pressure off your back a little bit because you're already up 7-0, right? And so it's like you feel like you were basically given a mulligan to kind of start the game. So it felt like Notre Dame was kind of chasing that mulligan, I guess, the rest of the game, in my opinion, knowing that they kind of got up early. And I think that pressure, that competitive pressure, was taken off them a little bit earlier than expected.
I can see that. And, I've seen before, like in Navy games, for example, where Notre Dame, like when it, like they come out and it almost seems too easy right off the bat. And they kind of have a hard time, sort of keeping that same intensity after that. I can see that. I can see where because it just felt a little bit, like a mix of some things, maybe an offensive malaise a little bit, the factors that you're talking about. I can definitely see that. Like we talked about it earlier in the week. I do feel like maybe they were kind of throwing some things in there, trying some things offensively against a Virginia defense that was definitely, trying to load up, stack up, and stop the run and things like that. And it took a little bit of a, time to get clicking, but the offense did finally come together. No matter what it was, they were up 35-0 before they ultimately won 35-14 to stay unbeaten. I do want to tell you about my bookie real quick, the one book that's got your back with no fluff, no second guessing, just straight up action with you in total control. At my bookie, it's never been about guessing. It's about giving you the edge. So every bet you place comes with confidence and a plan. If you know football and you love to win, my bookie was made for you. And if you're new to the game, don't know where to start, step up, use the promo code IRISH. It'll double your bankroll with a 100% deposit bonus right from the jump. That's more money, more power to make winning plays. Bet anything, anytime, from anywhere with my bookie, the sports book that gives you control and rewards from every moment of play. All right, so before we turn our attention directly on this matchup, Notre Dame and Army, Marcus Freeman's name floating out there as a potential NFL candidate, and it came up at his Thursday media Zoom call, and here's what Freeman had to say about it.
Yeah, I think it's just an example of what I tell our players every day. With team glory and with team success comes individual recognition and individual glory. And I know, and everybody hopefully in this program understands, that without everybody in this program accomplishing their roles, that we're not going to achieve the success that we want on the football field on Saturdays. And so when you do your job and everybody gets their job done and you have success, there are going to be certain individuals each week, certain parts of the year that have individual recognition and individual glory. But I know, and we know that, listen, I mean, it takes us all to achieve the success that we aspire to have. And so that to me is a reflection, your name's floating out there, and it's a reflection of how this program is playing and performing every day and on Saturdays. As for me, I try not to waste time thinking about an uncertain future. I tell our players that all the time, like, your future's uncertain. So I try not to waste time thinking about things that aren't in the moment. And so I haven't spent any time really thinking about what the future will provide. Do I ever want to coach in the NFL? I have no clue. I don't even know what that entails really right now, because I've never done it. But I'm just focused on, staying here in the present and getting this team ready to have a great Thursday practice and hopefully putting in the work to achieve the outcome that we want on Saturday.
So basically, Marcus Freeman, hey, if you're successful, you're going to get interest. I mean, we've seen it with a lot of his assistants already, obviously. Jess, anything stand out there to you that you heard from Mr. Freeman?
No, I don't think anything stood out, to be particular with you. And I think, like you said, it's unfortunate / fortunate to be, someone like Marcus Freeman, because you're in a high profile college position. You're starting to do well. You're having early success. You're young. And I think naturally people think, all right, well, if he's good and he's young, the next progression is to go to the NFL. And I just don't necessarily think that that's kind of where Marcus Freeman is at in terms of his career trajectory right now. And I still think he's still kind of, learning as a head coach and figuring things out and still, wrapping his head around being a college head coach, let alone an NFL head coach. But because of where he's coaching at and the success that he's had and how well he's done recruiting, I think naturally his name pops up. And then I'm sure Marcus Freeman has never thought about something like the NFL, but when it pops up and he gets asked about it, I think naturally your mind starts to wander a little bit of, is this something I might be interested in, etc. But I was telling Vince yesterday, I just don't think that that's kind of Marcus Freeman's career aspirations, if I had to guess. I think he's more of a guy who likes, working and developing young men, recruiting, and being a part of that, true transition between the college and the NFL at the end of the day. I think that's where he gets the most enjoyment, is forming, these relationships with young men and working with them beyond football. And when you get to the NFL, it's just football at that point, right? And so I think that's the part of the college gig that Marcus Freeman really enjoys.
Much more transactional at the professional level than I think the college level. Especially, for some coaches, it's still transactional at the college level. That's Marcus Freeman does not seem like a transactional kind of coach, and like when you hear people who are, around him and close to him, like that's not who he is. It's interesting because they're both ESPN and NFL Network put out these lists on the same day of, some of these college guys who are going to be at, NFL potential candidates and that kind of thing. One of the things that Tom Pelissero from the NFL Network said was he's an engaging presence who'll win the interview if and when he's willing to take one. And I mean, that's something about Marcus Freeman, like that went a long way when he had his opportunity, like when Notre Dame was kind of in the mix, kind of Luke Fickell at Cincinnati was interested in the job. His team was going to the playoff and it needed to wait. And so in the meantime, Marcus Freeman interviews and he knocked the interview out of the park, basically. And that's a big part that basically how he ended up becoming the Notre Dame football coach. It's like, Jack Swarbrick's like, well, we don't need to wait around for Luke Fickell. We've got our guy, so it is a lot different, college and the NFL, and he is still so young right now. And, there was someone, Donnie Moe on the Champions Lounge posted this. Freeman's only 38, obviously, and in his third season, so like, think about that, just for starters, how young he is and already in his third season. If he coaches 9 more years, he'll still only be 47 years old, but also he would have the longest tenure in Notre Dame football history 9 years from now. And if he is still coaching in 9 years, he'll have, a lot of success, obviously, at Notre Dame, because he's not going to still be around if he's not successful at Notre Dame. And, so like in that case, he'll be in the NFL before he's 50 years old. Like he would still have, a long time if he decided to do it. Like the thing with the NFL is, like you said, like this guy is still really young in his coaching career. So like as dynamic and as great a personality as he has, like he basically had a cup of coffee in the NFL. He was drafted by the Bears in 2009, but he never actually played for the Chicago Bears, so like difference between NFL and college. And, he just, his personality really just seems to lend itself much more to the college game, the way he relates to these players. Do you think, though, this could be a distraction at all for his team, this stuff popping up this late in the game?
No, I don't think it's a distraction as long as Marcus Freeman gets ahead of it and just says, hey, I think it's like a quick, brief, maybe at the end of the practice when you've got everyone's attention.
Kind of what he just said, right? Like, look, we're successful. There's going to be, stuff like this is going to happen, right?
Yeah, like it's successful. My name's going to be potentially be brought up, but I'm here to tell you guys personally that I'm not interested. I'm focused on, our goals at hand and what we want to accomplish, not only now, but the years going forward. And so I think you have to be, and that's something Marcus Freeman is really good, I think, at, is being upfront and transparent with his players. So just acknowledge it happened, acknowledge maybe why it happened, and just reassure the team, what his intentions are going forward. And I think naturally that stuff kind of takes care of itself. And you just say, hey, I'm telling you now because I want you to, the more you potentially hear it, the more you can be like, that's just not true. Like they can have an understanding of what the truth is and not have to worry about, basically rumors going around at the end of the day.
Right. So his attention is on Army. Everyone's attention is on Army. Primetime matchup, Yankee Stadium, coming up Saturday night in the Bronx. Army's 9-0, ranked number 19 in the college football playoff rankings this week. Is it, who would have thought? Like, is this a playoff elimination game for these two teams?
For Notre Dame and Army, it is 100% a playoff elimination game. If Army loses, they have no chance of being the Group of Five, outright bid. And I think a 2-loss Notre Dame team is not going to bode well, considering the strength of schedule that the SEC has with the amount of teams that they have at 2 losses, right? And I think on top of that, you fear Ohio State could be another one of those 2-loss teams. I mean, don't ask Vince because he thinks IU is just going to get absolutely stomped this weekend. But, if Notre Dame for whatever
That's
reason,
funny. Like Vince, like the way Vince's bias works. Like he hates Ohio State so much, but he's become so anti-Indiana because they haven't played anybody. I think it's going to be a fairly close competitive game.
I have IU covering the spread, and the last spread I saw was 13.5.
Yeah.
So I think I don't think that they're going to. They might lose by a touchdown or 10, but I don't know if I see them losing by 2 touchdowns. But again, say IU beats Ohio State. Well, now you've got a block of SEC schools that have 2 losses. You have Ohio State who has 2 losses, and their only 2 losses are to 2 undefeated Big Ten teams, or 2 teams that are likely going to play in the Big Ten championship, right? So I just think that if Notre Dame were to lose 2 games, it would have had to been to like Texas A&M and a better USC or better Louisville team. But that's just not the case. That they would have 2 non-Power 4 losses, and that's not going to go anywhere with this committee.
Yeah, absolutely. Notre Dame is definitely eliminated if they lose. Army is definitely eliminated if they lose. I mean, it is interesting that Army had kind of been, they were 25-1 I think in the first rankings that came out. They moved up a spot to 24. Now all of a sudden, the week they're getting ready to play Notre Dame, they're number 19. So like there's some movement. They moved up 5 spots. So if they were to win this game, I think the committee is positioning Army to vault itself into the playoff conversation at that point. They might jump up another 4 or 5 spots if they were to win this, if not more. So, I mean, both of these teams, if they want to be in the playoff, obviously have to win this game. It's the 4th opportunity for Notre Dame to beat a ranked opponent this season. There's a lot of, I would call it media backlash, because obviously the committee is very confident in where Notre Dame is. They have them number 6. There's a lot of media backlash about how high Notre Dame is ranked because of Northern Illinois. Do they need to blow out Army to justify where they are this weekend?
No, I don't think they necessarily need to blow out Army, but I don't think that you want to. I don't think you want to be trailing in this game and have to have some comeback close kind of win. I think you want to play good football, comfortably win, and the game should never be in a doubt. Is I think the best way to put it, right? And or like I don't think you want to play a sloppy game and lose and win by like a field goal at the end of the day, right? Like I think you have to play good, competent football and be in the driver's seat the entire time. Like I think it's going to be maybe close, until halftime, but I still think as long as you're doing the right things, you're in the driver's seat, you're not making mental mistakes, you're not playing sloppy football, and you go on to win by, 2 touchdowns or more, I think that would be considered a good win at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with Army, as we know, and we're going to get into it here in a minute, is you have to maximize those offensive possessions. And, barring like they can't come out, they can't be a team turning the ball over, giving Army, opportunities, being sloppy like you were talking about. That's just a slow burn, methodical win. We'll do it. You got to maximize your possessions though against this Army team because of the way they play offense. I mean, they have had some long possessions this season. They have had the fewest 3rd down attempts of any team in the country. And again, we'll touch on that here in just a second. But Brady Quinn, I saw, was on the Dan Patrick Show. I don't know if you saw this clip, but Brady basically said he will get a buzz cut. He will cut those wonderful locks of his. He'll get a buzz cut if Notre Dame were to lose to Army this weekend. He told Dan Patrick.
Are we teeing this up for an upset or something? Like I don't like hearing that kind of stuff because
Army's going to be America's team this weekend, right? Like, yeah, they're the story. And again, like when it comes to like Notre Dame is not the story when you talk about media narratives and all those different things. It's like it's easier, from the narrative perspective to pick apart Notre Dame and focus on that Northern Illinois loss because it's not nearly as fun, from that when you're the media, like they root for the story, and the story is Indiana and Army at this point. So, like, even though the media is not supposed to have a rooting interest, a lot of people who'll be sitting up there in press boxes and writing stories afterwards who are going to be rooting for Army because that's the story of the weekend because they're taking on Notre Dame.
Let me ask you this: have you heard one of the takes this week from Will Compton? He's on the Bussin' with the Boys kind of podcast. He said he is rooting against Army because he doesn't want to see Army potentially go into the play. Like, because if Army wins this game and then they win their last game, they'd be the Group of 5 champ going to the playoffs, right? And so his take was,
think they'd move past Boise State, though? Do you think they'd move ahead of Boise State?
I think they'd have to because Boise State has a loss and Army would be undefeated at the end of the day. So,
yeah.
I mean, I guess what I'm getting at is he basically said, save Army from the embarrassment on the national stage and just get this loss done with right away. And he said, I don't know if that makes me un-American, but I just don't want to see Army get crushed on the national stage is what he was saying. Basically, let Notre Dame handle this early.
See, even then, you feel bad for Army. Like, so you'd rather just see, it's still going to be on the national stage. It's on national TV, and it's 2 ranked teams. It's one of the bigger matchups this weekend when you look at the slate this weekend. But I mean, I could see that because I think that's exactly what would happen. Navy would just get fed to the wolves at that point. And like going back to Brady Quinn, he told Dan Patrick he doesn't think this is going to be particularly close.
So, I don't think so either, as long as Notre Dame handles what they're supposed to.
Yeah, but I don't think it's going to be quite as convincing as the Navy game. I do feel like Army is a little bit more physical. They are the better team between Army and Navy. And obviously we know that turnovers played a huge part in that Navy game. I don't think they're going to be quite as reckless with the ball as Navy was, but who knows? We wouldn't have thought that Navy was going to be, because if you're a service academy player, what are you supposed to be known for? Your discipline and your hard-nosed nature and all that kind of stuff. And we didn't see the discipline by Navy. But just like with Navy, when Army shows up out there, this is going to be the biggest, fastest, most talented team they have seen since last year. They haven't played a Power 4 opponent this season. They played 3 Power 4 opponents last year: Boston College, Syracuse, and LSU. They lost to all 3 of them. They got smoked by LSU. Now, granted, I realize this is a different team, but they're on a 13-game winning streak right now. They lost a lot of games last year, and they kind of pulled it. They turned a corner late in the season. They won their last 4 games last season, but again, they weren't against Power 4 opponents. And now here they come and heading into Yankee Stadium with a 13-game winning streak. Bryson Daly, their quarterback, is their horse. 174 carries, 1,062 yards, 21 touchdown runs. He's thrown 7 touchdowns and has over 600 yards. Plain and simple, is Daly the key to their offense?
Yeah, I think Daly, has to be the key to their offense. And, it feels like this was already weeks ago for some reason, but when we did that whiteboard on Tuesday, and I know it wasn't the most in-depth whiteboard, but the number one thing we talked about was Army's point of attack. And I think Army's point of attack is going to be between B-gap and B-gap, right? Whether that's fullback dive, quarterback ISO, quarterback power, it all is predicated around the fullback and the quarterback. And watching Army play, their quarterback, I think, runs the ball the most out of anyone on the team, right? And so, yeah, this offense is predicated around him. And most importantly, it's a physical, downhill, kind of in the trenches point of attack. It's not on the perimeter. I don't think Army has the speed. And I don't think their quarterback has the speed, to be quite honest with you, because he doesn't have many breakaway touchdowns. He's more of a physical, between the tackle kind of runner. And he gets caught from behind. He doesn't really break away from people. So,
and it's easier to be a physical between the no, I mean, great. He's got the size. Like he's built like, basically built about like Manti Te'o, maybe not quite as big as Manti, but he's 6 foot tall, 225 pounds, so he's thick. He's thicker than the Navy quarterback, but it's easier to be that physical kind of runner. As you said, most of it comes between the tackles, and even like just the A gaps. It's just a matter of, okay, we're gonna do a little ISO here. I'm gonna fake it to the fullback, then I'm gonna just follow the fullback right through the hole, or I'll look like I'm gonna follow him through the hole, and I'll peel off over here and I'll cut to my right and run between this, run through this other A gap. But it's easier to do that when you're going up against, North Texas and Lehigh's and the kind of teams that Army has played, because that's how they've been able to be so physical with them, because they're not bigger and faster and stronger than them.
Yeah, Notre Dame's not going to be pushed around quite like some of these other opponents that Army has faced. And to be honest with you as well, we saw what Notre Dame's speed and athleticism, what kind of pressure it placed on Navy, right? And I think that Navy is more athletic and quicker than what Army is. And so if Navy struggle with Notre Dame, I'm curious to see, what kind of fits Notre Dame can give to Army. And I think I said this the other day too. If Notre Dame is able to shut down their between the tackle game, it's going to be a very long day for Army, because I don't think they have quite as they don't have another option, essentially, right? Like they're not going to bode well if Notre Dame shuts them down in the middle, and now they're forced to maybe attack the perimeter, or this is like worst case scenario, start resorting to some of that pass game if they have to, because it's just going to be a long game for them at that point. So I think, Notre Dame's main focus has to be shutting down that between the tackles game, and forcing Army to get outside of its comfort zone, because I don't see them doing any better than Navy at the end of the day. So it's going to be, as long as Notre Dame does what they're supposed to, it's going to be a long day for Army.
But you talked about earlier this week when we were talking about him, Kanye Udo, number 6. He's got the second most carries. Daly has 174 carries. Udo has 128 carries and 865 yards. So he does tote it a little bit, but he's like a little bit more. He's a little, like he'll line up in that traditional fullback spot, but he's got a little more wiggle, a little more quickness to him than like your typical Army or Navy fullback, right?
Yeah, I'd say he's got more athleticism and speed than a traditional fullback. I'd say he's more of like a halfback that's putting his hand in the ground, or maybe a cross between or a hybrid between a fullback and a running back. But he's outside of the quarterback. He would be the next guy that I'm most worried about. Those two in tandem and their kind of mesh on that fake fullback dive, QB power. That's their bread and butter. Those two are going to be the guys that are doing the majority of the heavy lifting for them.
But I think the differentiation that you made between Army and Navy's style, I think is right, because there's definitely a little bit more flash to Navy's game, in part because they added so much shotgun, and Army will run some shotgun too, but Navy added the shotgun, and they do, although we didn't necessarily see it in the Notre Dame game, that they will try to throw the ball around a little bit more, but they are a little bit, Navy is a little bit more quicker and athletic, whereas Army is, again, like it's a bit more bully ball, where you're just running those guys in between the tackles and trying to outmuscle you off the line of scrimmage. All right, so Army has just 101 third down attempts this season. It is the fewest of any team in the nation. So just how crucial is it for the Irish defense to get that Army offense off schedule?
Oh, Tim, it's so important. They are, as Coach Trustle used to say, 3 yards in a cloud of dust. That's what they want. They are a vertical, physical, power running team, and they are good with getting 3 yards, 4 yards, 3 yards, 4 yards. And if you don't get them behind the chains, they're going to continue to do it for 11, 12, 15 play drives. And it's so important to get some negative yardage plays, 1 yard gains. We cannot allow them to stay in rhythm as they go down the field. So it's so important. We know it's important, but now we have to find ways to do that on Saturday.
So, again, we talked about how, their mode of operation, there's so much of, the quarterback ISO, follow the fullback through the hole, between the tackles and all that kind of stuff, as you pointed out, a lot of simple, A gap, B gap type stuff. What's the biggest challenge for Al Golden's defense to limiting this Army offense on early downs?
I think you got to be uber successful on first down. You can't allow them to get, 5 yards, 4 yards, anything above or more than 3 yards on first down. They're already ahead of schedule, right? So I think the number one thing you have to do is get them off schedule on first down, essentially, right? It's like, to me, it's like when they talk about pitchers throwing a first pitch strike, it's this kind of similar between Army and between Army and Notre Dame. Both of those teams are trying to throw a first pitch strike. Notre Dame is trying to throw a first pitch strike on defense by not allowing them to get, 4 or 5 yards on first down, and Army's trying to throw a first pitch strike by getting 4 or 5 yards on first down. And so I think what you have to do to stop them early or be successful on those early downs is just take away the fullback dive, to be honest with you. Force them to try to go horizontal instead of vertical and downhill. I think that's what's going to be the most successful for Notre Dame on those early downs is limiting their downhill game as much as possible, not allowing them to get 4 or 5 yards on first down and stay ahead of schedule.
Now, again, I ask you this as, you were a linebacker in high school and in college, and in high school you played against the option team of the area, the Mishawaka Cavemen, who, by the way, are in semi-state this weekend. For the first time, second time that they've been to semi-state, I think, in the last 6 or 7 years, but they're trying to get to state for the first time since you guys played against them in 2012 when you were in high school. But you played against them 5 different times because you played them in the postseason once. You played them twice one season. So, you had a lot of experience going up against that wing tee option offense. So as someone who had a lot of experience going against that, even though, again, it's not going to look exactly the same as Navy's option, how much do you think it helps Notre Dame's defense having some of that experience, going up against those option concepts already once this season?
Yeah, I think it's a huge benefit because Notre Dame, the basis or the foundation of the wing tee triple option is the same. Like Army and Navy's foundation is the same, but they just kind of find different ways to put window dressings on it, right? And so I think playing Navy helps because you have a basic foundation and you've practiced your responsibilities. I don't think responsibility-wise things are going to change too much between, like what the Mike linebacker is doing and maybe what the outside linebacker is doing and the safety is doing. You're going to have the same responsibilities. It's just a matter of how Army kind of delivers their product at the end of the day. Like they might line up a little bit different. They might window dress it a little bit. But at the end of the day, your responsibility in your position is majority going to stay the same. And so to already have that practice and repetition at it, I think is something that's going to benefit Notre Dame a lot. It just gives you more ease at the end of the ease of mind at the end of the day as a defender. It's not like you're kind of cramming for this exam and hoping that it goes right, almost like you've had practice doing it. You've taken an exam on it before. Now you're kind of just, brushing up on your study material and going back in for a second exam.
Yeah. I mean, like that, because like we actually, like when I was in high school, we had a wishbone offense. Like this was back in the Barry Switzer heyday when he was running full wishbone down at Oklahoma. So that's what we ran, but there's still a difference between running it and going against it. And I remember like being young, going against it in scout team, like just that uneasiness that you have of like, okay, I've got the quarterback. I've got to stick with the quarterback no matter what, even though there's, a guy to the outside ready to take the pitch the minute, because that's where Notre Dame got burned when Horvath cranked off that first big run. I think it was the touchdown run in the first half against Notre Dame was, I believe it was Osbury, just kind of got left on that island out there in the alley because one of the inside backers got blocked. And all of a sudden, here's Osbury trying to play both men. And as soon as you find yourself, in that situation, it's just a no-win situation. But there's at least a little bit more, comfort level, I think, having already gone through that, just a few weeks ago.
Yeah, there's a comfort level, and I'm glad you brought up that because there's the opportunity to learn from mistakes as well. Like everything didn't go perfect against Navy. And so to be able to kind of come back and say, all right, here's the things we did well, here's the things we need to fix, and here is now maybe how we fine tune our game plan specific to Army now, kind of taking in, again, combining what we did well, what we need to fix, and tailoring things a little bit more or tweaking things around, what Army does. I think you're going to find a kind of a perfect recipe at the end of the day. So I don't think it's ever a bad thing that you played a triple option once before this season. It might suck because of the physicality, right, and having to do it 2 times, but the preparation that you get is invaluable for the second time that you play the triple option.
So we haven't talked about the other side of the ball very much, but it is one of the best scoring defenses, number 2 scoring defense in the nation. They're only allowing a little over 10 points per game. And, because of the fact that it is an option offense, teams only average around 8 possessions per game offensively against Army. Do you think what do you think that means for Notre Dame's offense in this game?
It's a tough question because
well, no, it's a stump you.
Well, it's a double-edged sword because part of you wants to say, yes, we want to hold the ball, have methodical drives, but then if something happens where you hold the ball and then you don't get points out of it, now Army holds the ball for a while and they get points out of it, that could be a whole quarter, right? Like you could be trailing at that point 7-0 going against Army, but then on the flip side is like you don't want to go too fast where you're constantly putting your defense out on the field against an opponent like Army because of how physical and how assignment sound it is, right? So you have to find that perfect balance of maybe going tempo, but also not going too, not going too slow, but not going too fast at the end of the day. But I think what you have to do if you're Notre Dame in this situation is you just have to get in the tempo that is allowing you to move the ball the best down the field, right? I don't think you want to get caught up of, are we going too fast? Are we going too slow? But if I were, Marcus Freeman, I would lean on being on the side of more tempo at the end of the day. I think you do want to try to kind of, because the best way to beat a team like Army is you get out early and you keep piling on and piling on and piling on, right? So the more that you can score in a condensed amount of time, the more pressure that puts onto Army to kind of catch up because they can't be running an offense that holds the ball an entire quarter when you're down 21-0 already, right? So it's like finding that perfect balance of, let's go tempo, but let's not go too fast where we go 3 and out and now our defense is back on the field again, So it's like that's the hard part to me.
I just think it's tough for Army defensively. Like Riley Leonard, Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price. They haven't seen 3 athletes like those 3 guys in a whole season, and all 3 of those guys could be on the field on any given play Saturday night. Like I think that is just, I would be, and then they're not going to be terrified of it, but it's pretty terrifying if I'm Army and I'm the Army defensive coordinator, I'm looking over and I see that, like, do you think they're loading up, trying to stop Notre Dame's run? Like, is that the attack that you would go with?
100%. I think you're going to see a lot of loaded boxes and man coverage on the back end by Army. I think they're going to do everything in their power to shut down the run game and make Riley Leonard beat them with his arm. Because if you're Army, I feel like if I'm going to go down in a sinking ship, I'm going to go down playing disciplined run defense. And if Notre Dame's athletes, wide receivers, Riley Leonard's arm is what beats me, so what? But I feel like being an academy school, it's all about like discipline, controlling the controllables, all that stuff. I would try to control the run game and get beat on the passing game if I had to, right? Like I feel like it's easier to shut down a run game than it would be to shut down a passing game at the end of the day. So if I'm Army, that's what I'm kind of leaning towards is we're gonna be disciplined and shut down your run game. And if you beat us with your arm, you beat us with your arm, right? But like that's how it's gonna be.
Yeah, and I mean, man to man, there's a lot of mismatches that Leonard and those receivers can take advantage of. But I mean, just when you play the odds out, like if you're going to go analytics on this thing, obviously that has been a much more inconsistent part of Notre Dame's offense this year. The aerial attack than that ground game. But he showed, for example, in the Navy game, and he's shown a few times this season that he can be pretty successful throwing the ball, especially when you have bigger, faster receivers you can go to, who you're going to win a lot of mismatches with. But I mean, that would be what I would be expecting if I'm Notre Dame, to see them loading up and trying to stop that running game. Jesse, are you ready for rapid fire?
Let's do it. Some countdown fire.
Yes. Fill in the blank. The Shamrock Series uniforms Notre Dame will wear against Army are blank.
I like to say they're simple but sweet. There's not a lot to them. They it's almost not replicating their home jersey, but I mean it's blue gray jersey, sorry, and gold kind of
outlined against a blue-gray October sky. Don't forget.
Right. And those kind of shiny metallic gold numbers, right? So I think they're simple, but they have a sweet look to them. They have a cool look to them. And so I'm curious to see them, on live TV. I think they're going to look even better. And to be honest with you, I've contemplated if Notre Dame goes, if they finish this season how they're supposed to, I want to personally buy a Shamrock Series sweatshirt that has that blue-gray color and like that gold kind of shiny ND logo on it. So
you might have to find one sooner than later. I mean, I don't know how long the Shamrock Series stuff lasts, So
I know. So like, I guess that's what I'm trying to give an inclination to. I'm not just saying these things. Like I think they look cool enough that I'm gonna probably buy something from the Shamrock Series.
I will have to say these things grew on me pretty quickly, because first glance, seeing them, I was like, I don't know about this. And I don't know, like what they're going to look like on TV. That'll be kind of a different thing, but they are this all, it's a monochrome uniform, and they went with this. They're calling it blue-gray sky, I think is the color that they're calling this, for Grantland Rice's outlined against a blue-gray October sky for the Four Horsemen thing. But I saw some media, on the social media stuff, they've had like big banners and posters up at some place in New York, and they showed some of them. I think they look pretty sharp. Just what I've seen, they look pretty sharp. And you pop those gold numbers with the gold helmet as well. I'll be really curious to see what the reaction from Notre Dame fans are, because some of them have seen these already, but it's always the vast majority. It's like game time, and now they see what the uniforms are, and a lot of people can't handle it, basically. So
let me ask you this. Do you like these more or less than the pinstripe jerseys that they wore against Syracuse?
Oh, much more. I couldn't stand the pinstripes.
I hated those pinstripe uniforms.
Yeah. I thought the pinstripe was the worst thing they've ever done.
Dang.
Yeah.
Just let it all out.
Did not like it. Did not like it at all. Like pinstripes on a baseball uniform are one thing, and obviously they were doing a Yankees theme by doing the pinstripes, but they did not look good with a football uniform. I'm glad they only did it once. Fill in the blank. It's blank that Rod Hurd has missed one tackle all season.
It's very impressive, because I think the hardest thing to do as a defender is to tackle, right? And especially for defensive backs who are, probably undersized in terms to some of these running backs and wide receivers. So to be that accurate or that precise as a tackler is just very impressive, especially as someone coming from a player that's in the secondary.
Yeah, and the fact that you're 10 games into the season and you've only, it's like one thing if, it's like 2 or 3 games, he's missed one tackle. They're 10 games into the season, and this guy, has had to do some different stuff, whether it's safety or nickel or, even some corner at times, and they brought him in from Northwestern because they obviously had some confidence in him. But, he's also had 19 solo tackles this season, which is a pretty good number, almost 2 solo tackles per game, and that's a pretty good number for a defensive back. And, basically defensive backs are not known for tackling. They're known for their coverage. And So it's outstanding to me. And I saw this week, and I could not believe it. He talked a little bit about it at the media availability earlier this week. So kudos to him. That's pretty great to be 10 games into the season and have just one missed tackle. So here's a question and answer exchange, speaking of that media session, between a reporter and Irish defensive coordinator Al Golden earlier this week. Question: do you think scoring average should include the points with an offset of the points the defenses scores itself? Answer from Al Golden: have you watched Army yet? You guys got to have a beer and talk about that. I'm trying to stop this quarterback. That, Jesse, is blank.
That is an egoless defensive coordinator. And that's the kind of defensive coordinator that I want. I don't want this defensive coordinator that's caught up in the stats and how many points they've contributed to the offense and, what kind of offset that means. All he cares about is team success. And more importantly, all he cares about is his component of the equation. How is he going to stop Army's quarterback in order for Notre Dame to win as a team? And so I think that's the perfect response. I think it's a great response. And again, I think it shows the lack of ego that Al Golden has at the end of the day. He cares about his team and, more importantly, how his defense is going to stop this quarterback.
Al Golden's out here like, stats. You're talking to me about stats? I don't need no stinking stats. I don't care about any of this stuff. Put on the freaking game film and, look at this Army quarterback. That's what I'm focused on. And yeah, I mean, like, I'm looking at number 13. You guys want to stop number 13? That's what I'm thinking about. I don't care about, like scoring averages and all this different stuff, but you're absolutely right. Like, he just goes out there and grinds it every week, grinds that film all week and gets them to go out there. And it's, you remember that second half against Navy 2 years ago. And I was just thinking about that. Since that second half, remember, Notre Dame got the big lead in the first half. Navy made that charge in the second half, made it very uncomfortable, almost came back. If there was like 5 more minutes in that game, they probably would have won that game. But since that game, the last two times Al Golden's defense has lined up against an option offense, it has not been pretty for those
I mean, he cracked the code, to be honest with you. He struggled with it when he first came in, and that's natural because he's an NFL guy and no one in the NFL runs triple option, right? And so I think that it's okay to see a natural grace period or adjustment to tweaking your scheme in order to stop the triple option. And so, but since then, we've seen, like you said, just nothing but dominance against the triple option. And again, I'm not trying to jinx it or anything, but I just don't see that stopping this weekend against Army.
I don't either. Speaking of the quarterback, guess who was the scout team quarterback and doing his best Bryson Daly impersonation this week?
It was Tyler Buckner. It's been Tyler Buckner. He's done a wonderful job. Really has owned the position and studied it and practiced it and walked through it. And he's done a great job of being our scout team quarterback this week and understanding all the details that this offense truly entails, from the cadence to the motions to the specific running points and throwing opportunities that they've utilized. And so he's done as well as we could have asked to prepare us Tuesday and Wednesday for this challenge we are going to face on Saturday.
So Buckner, Jess, was the scout team quarterback for Navy as well. So this is both option offenses. Do you think he's the magic elixir for the Irish?
I do, and I think it's funny that everyone loves to get not caught up, but they're like, everyone's so curious about who's playing scout team quarterback. It's like, I think it's a pretty funny topic.
I'll admit, I asked the question. I asked him the question. I said, Buckner was your scout team quarterback for Navy. I had a feeling it was going to be Buckner. I just wanted to know. My curiosity was, because there is a difference in the two Navy quarterbacks that we've talked about. Like Daly is a little bit beefier and more physical than Horvath, for example. Like, would you still use Buckner? Would you go with a different guy? But they went with Buckner.
Yeah, and I think that Buckner, and this is why Marcus Freeman had no hesitations with bringing Tyler Buckner back to the football team, because he is a guy who is just going to be absolutely team first, right? He is going, whatever you want him to do, whether that's playing scout team quarterback, whether that's playing scout team wide receiver, whether or not that's being the holder so he can fake a field goal and pick up a first. Like, no matter what the task is, Tyler Buckner will do it, and he'll do it with a smile on his face and an enthusiasm unmatched, right? Because that's who he is. He's just a kid who loves football, who loves Notre Dame, and will do anything that it takes to continue to be out there with his teammates and be a part of the program, etc. Because, Tyler Buckner could just be focusing on lacrosse if he wanted to, right? Like, there's no real benefit to Tyler Buckner being on the football team other than just living it out as living out his dream and personal enjoyment as long as possible. And so I think that's, again, goes back to why Marcus Freeman was so happy and so receptive to having someone like Tyler Buckner on the team, is he knows his job and he's willing to do anything you ask of him.
Yeah, it's like there's the scene in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood where Leonardo DiCaprio, Brad Pitt was the stunt man, and Leo, he was trying to talk, like the studio guy into, letting Brad Pitt, they didn't want to let him be the stunt man. And Leo's like, hey, you can do whatever you want with him. You can throw him off a building, you can run him over, you basically just, he's your own personal toy out there. And that's kind of how Tyler Buckner has been this year. I mean, he's, willing to do anything and everything for the team. And, I do think, and we talked about this, when he mimicked Horvath, like, you can obviously, like, you're talking about a guy who was the starting quarterback for Notre Dame 2 years ago, and he is your scout team quarterback going against these service academy teams. Like, the kind of athlete that that he is on your scout team is nothing, like the quarterbacks that you're going to see, as great as they might be at running their offenses, just purely athletically, physically, they're nothing like the kind of looks, I don't think, that Tyler Buckner can give the defense during the week leading up to it.
Yeah, and he's the type of guy that you want in there because he is going to give you the most game-like look out of anyone. He used to play quarterback. He's tremendously athletic. He was especially good runner, dual threat quarterback, right? And so when you're trying to replicate someone like Daly and this Army offense, he is going to give you the most true look at the end of the day. And honestly, again, he doesn't show up on the stats sheet, but that's an important component, right? Because he is prepping this defense to the best of his ability. He is getting them ready to the most game-like situation. And so, again, it might not show up on the stat sheet. It might not have any tackles or passing yards, but he is still a contributing member to this win at the end of the day because of the looks that he is giving them in practice.
So a unique connection the Irish have in this game, 30-year-old former U.S. Army Captain Eric Goins, of course. He's the walk-on kicker for Notre Dame. He kicked at the Citadel several years back before he went into the Army for 7 years.
It's been a great addition for our program. He has a very important role on Saturdays, and he's getting his job done to the standard that we need it to be done. Having a guy like Eric be able to share his wisdom with our entire program, but specifically our young guys during fall camp was meaningful. He was able to speak to them through a lens of experience, through a guy that's been to other places, that has been in the military, and I think he provided some wisdom for our guys that they don't get to hear every fall camp when you have the senior speak. We haven't spent any time this week talking about his experience, obviously in the military, but it's something that I know he obviously values, and everybody around here is appreciative of what he's done in his service. But he knows he has a job to do on Saturday, and that's most important, and making sure he's ready to go.
So Goins has been the kickoff specialist since Purdue. What do you think, Jess?
I think that he's done a really good job about, I'm not a fan of just kicking that thing out of the back of the end zone these days. I like the idea of being able to kind of drop it, some of these finesse kicks, right? And I think what really stood out is what happened in that Virginia game last week. He put Chris Tyree in an uncomfortable situation trying to come up and field that kick. And so
True.
I think the more that you can play with the kick of, maybe it's left, maybe it's right, maybe it's on the 1 yard line, maybe it's on the 5 yard line, maybe it's on the 10 yard line, it puts pressure on the kick return to where the point where they're just not fair catching it or letting it go out of the back of the end zone. They still need to execute, right? And so I think that, one, that catches teams off guard. And two, when you got to kind of run up and make a play on it like Chris Tyree does, that sort of combination can lead to, maybe some of these errors or, critical turnovers that I think are going to be important down the line. And so come playoff time, I'd like to see that sort of stuff because it puts the pressure on the other team. And more importantly, it creates the potential for turnover, giving Notre Dame an extra possession, giving Notre Dame extra points, essentially, at the end of the day. So,
well, as you say that, and I hadn't really thought about it as much that way, because it's like you look, and this guy has kicked off 40 times since the Purdue game, and he's got 19 touchbacks. So about half of them have been touchbacks. But I mean, I think that those are good points. But doesn't it also sort of justify the way they have gone about asking Matt Rendell to punt, even though, when they just let him boom it last week, he was a lot better punter, but they've been trying to do some different things with Matt Rendell, like with the rugby style punt and those kind of, you see what I'm getting at? Like we're praising the kicker and what they're doing with the kicker on the one hand, but because Rendell hasn't been as on top of things as we'd probably like to see as the punter, it's been a little bit more frustrating.
Yeah, I kind of see what you're saying there. And I think that Notre Dame has to assess both of those positions differently, right? Like I think before you can ask Rendell to start tinkering and finesse things, you just got to get him comfortable booming the punt, getting his feet underneath him a little bit, right? And so I think that different, like kickoff and punt are, I get it, it's special teams, but it's still two kind of drastically different situations.
Things. Yeah.
And I think that's where I'm getting at. I think there's more room for error and potential to play on kickoff than there is on punt, right? Because I think with punt, if you start trying to, tinker and finesse, that's when you get these short 30, 40-yard punts.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just got to tell them to let it loose. And if that thing's a touchback, it's a touchback. But I just think that there's more room to kind of tinker and play on kickoff. And unless you kick it out of bounds, there's really less risk as well because, like, again, worst case scenario, they return it or you kick it to someone who's going to return it. Well, you still have a whole entire kick return defense out there trying to stop them. But if you shank a punt, you shank a punt. There's really no kind of coming back from that. So I think the difference in, punt and kickoff is ultimately kind of why you see maybe, there should be different styles. I agree. I think Rendell should be a guy who's just kind of letting it loose a little bit. Where with Goins, I think there's more room to play.
Yeah. So Action Sports Network put out hypothetical odds for the first round college football playoff matchups. Of course, these are not actual live odds because the games are definite. They're not definite. But here's what Action Sports Network said their lines would be based on the matchups that the College Football Playoff Committee announced this week. Ohio State would be a 21-point favorite hosting BYU. Indiana hosting Ole Miss, a 5.5-point underdog. And then Notre Dame hosting Alabama and Penn State hosting Georgia. Both of those would be pick'em games. So what do you think of the odds for those four games?
I agree with the Ohio State spread. I think that's just about right. I think Indiana and Ole Miss, I majority agree with. I would be in favor of Ole Miss on that one. I think a little bit. I think that should be maybe closer to like 6.5 or 7.5, to be honest with you. I think Notre Dame and Alabama is a true pick'em. I don't agree with Penn State and Georgia being a pick'em. I think Georgia should be like a 2.5 favorite at least on that one. I don't know how you could say.
I was going to say 2.5, 3.5. I would make Georgia a favorite in that game.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of where I'm at. I largely agree with them, but I guess if I had to pick the one I disagree the most with, it would be the Penn State and Georgia pick'em.
21 points in that Ohio State game. Like I could see like 13.5.
But that's the same spread as IU, and I think IU is better than what BYU is.
Interesting. 21 just seems like a lot, but none of us are really sold on BYU. So, I guess it makes sense. Speaking of Indiana, Ohio State, what happens to the loser this weekend? Is the loser done?
No. I think both losers would get in, to be honest with you. I think Ohio State would be very close to the end of the pack, but I think they would value a 2-loss Ohio State team where their only 2 losses are to the teams playing in the Big Ten championship.
Yeah, I do think like how the game is played, what the final score is going to matter in terms of.
I think if both teams lose, they both end up in the same spot, really. I think the winner would likely be the 5 seed if they don't go on and win the Big Ten championship. And I think the loser is hovering right around that 11 or 12 seed at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think that the loser is probably like that 11 or 12. I mean, that's what, remember, Tennessee got left out. They were 11, but they ended up getting left out. And I think that the loser of this game, it's probably like them, Tennessee, and maybe Texas A&M, depending on, like if Texas A&M can beat Texas next week, and then like if Texas A&M would ultimately end up losing the SEC championship game, for example, like I think that those 3 teams are kind of hovering down there at the bottom in terms of, because like A&M right now is the 15 seed, but again, like you beat Texas next week, then you're gonna be right back in the thick of things in terms of playoff contention, even with 2 losses. So it's gonna make things. But so I think the loser is down there. The winner is all but assured a spot in the playoff, right?
Yeah, I mean, the winner is either going to go on and win the Big Ten championship and get one of the 4 at-large bids, or they're going to lose in the Big Ten championship and be the number 5 seed. Whoever loses the Big Ten championship is going to be the 5 seed, whether that's Oregon, IU, or Ohio State.
Yeah, I agree with that. So I've got some game props. Which are you most confident in? Which are you least confident in? Have you had a chance to look them over?
Yes, I have.
I'll kind of go through them. Notre Dame is a 14.5-point favorite. They, of course, did not cover last week. We had a little bad beat, backdoor cover by Virginia last week. The over-under in this game is 45.5. Riley Leonard's props, 196.5 passing yards, which is interesting because last week it was up to 210, and he went over 200 yards last week, but it's down to 196.5 this week. 55.5 yards is his rushing number, 1.5 touchdown passes. He's minus 220 as an anytime touchdown scorer, plus 350, to score the first touchdown. Bryson Daly for Army, 77.5 passing yards, 88.5 rushing yards, minus 135 as an anytime scorer. Jeremiah Love, his rushing number this week, 72.5. It was 61.5 last week. No Jadarian Price prop for the second straight week. I don't get that. Is it too hard for them to pick a number on him?
I do believe he is either like that boomer bust type situation. I don't think they found like kind of comfortable number for him. And to be honest with you, I don't think they don't know. No one knows what the carry situation is going to be. So I think it's really hard for them to kind of forecast what's going to happen there.
Bo Collins, 30.5 receiving yards this week. It was 39.5 last week. Jordan Faison shows up this week, 27.5. He was not listed last week. Jaden Greathouse not listed for the second straight week. Army not to score a touchdown is plus 400. Each team to score 2+ touchdowns and 2+ field goals, plus 1,400. I thought that I'd throw that one in there.
If I promise you to be very quick, can I just go down the line and say yes,
Sure.
no, yes, no?
Sure.
Because I'm not going to give a bunch of in-depth, but I think I do want to like go through.
You want to hit them all. Okay.
Yeah. Notre Dame 14.5. I believe they cover.
Yes.
Over 45.5. I think it's going to go over because I think Notre Dame is going to do the majority of the work there and be around 40. Riley Leonard passing yards, I'm going to say under 196.5. I think he's going to go over on his rushing yards. I think it's going to be a really big Riley Leonard rushing game. I think he gets in for anytime touchdown as well.
Interesting that when you look at Army, they've not faced a mobile quarterback like Riley Leonard this season. And again, with that speed that he's got, I think you're right. I love the over on Riley Leonard, 55.5 rushing yards.
I would parlay his rushing yards and his anytime touchdown, to be honest with you. Bryson Daly, I'm going to say under on the 77.5 passing.
Me too.
And I'm going to have to take the over in the 88.5 because he's going to play the whole game regardless.
They're just going to run him so much.
Yeah, he's going to play all 4 quarters. He's going to be due to at least break a big one, and he's still going to have 20 other carries that go for probably at least 2 yards. So it's going to rack up. Give me the over on the 88.5. I'm going to stay away from his anytime touchdown because I don't know if Army is going to score at the end of the day. So they might get some field goals, but I don't know how I feel about it. I don't know how I feel about a touchdown. So I would stay away from any Army touchdown. So I'm not going to touch any of their touchdowns.
Okay. I like it.
Jeremiah Love. For some reason, I feel like this is a Riley Leonard and Jadarian Price type week. So I'm going to say the under on his yards, but I do think he finds a way to get a touchdown and continue his streak of scoring in a game every
11 straight games overall, going back to last year now.
Yep, I think he'll get in. I think Jadarian Price is an anytime touchdown scorer. I would parlay Price, Love, and Riley Leonard. I think they're all going to get a rushing touchdown this week. I just think it's going to be a very equally distributed attack. So I do think Jadarian Price gets a touchdown, and if he had a rushing prop, I would likely take the over on it as well. Bo Collins, I'm just gonna say under for all of these wide receivers because I don't like touching them. I think Riley Leonard's gonna have a big rushing game, and even if they do throw the ball, it's just a different guy every week.
You just don't know.
So it's not worth it to kind of think you can guess on these wide receivers. So I'm gonna stay away from any of the wide receiver props. Army not to score a touchdown, I think that's worth the dabble at plus 400. To be honest with you, if you wanted to put $25 on that and make 100, I think it's a 50-50 chance at the end of the day, and plus 400 odds is better than a 50-50 chance at the end of the day. So it's something that has a ton of value, even if you think it's not going to happen. It's still something that I would like put $20 to $25 on.
And this is why I included this. I thought that was a very interesting number there with the value that you get for that.
That's what I mean. It's just look at what they've done against some of these other teams. Like they've barely given up a touchdown to the majority of the last 6 opponents they've played. And again, for something that's truly probably 50-50, getting plus 400 is just really good odds at the end of the day. Each team to score 2 touchdowns and 2 field goals, there's just no chance. So I would
that's why it's plus 1,400.
I would not mess with that one.
All right. I like that. I agree with a good chunk of what you're saying. I do like Love to go over 72.5 yards because I just feel like last week there's a very good chance that he's going to pop like 150 or 60 yard run.
That's the one I'm least. I would say I could be the most swayed on.
But again, it's all I could see why Vegas stays away from Jadarian Price for that very reason because just all these things from week to week, it changes quite a bit for Notre Dame in terms of, who's carrying the
So if you're a smart person, what you'll do is you'll listen to this show and then you'll go, oh, I heard about that MyBookie promo that they have. I'll put in the code Irish. I'll get some, a free bet, a deposit match. I'll take all of this great wisdom that was just dropped on me between all these props. I'll pick out the one I like best. And I'll use my little MyBookie on it at the end of the day because that's what I'm gonna do. Is I'm gonna parlay Notre Dame to cover the spread, the over, and Riley Leonard's over on rushing yards. That is going to be my 3-leg parlay this weekend.
All right, I like it. That sounds like a very very wise option to me. All right, Notre Dame Army. Let's make a prediction on this game. What do you got?
I have an Army coming in with a swift 6 points. I think they're going to get 2 field goals at the end of the day. I think they'll get one early. They'll feel good about it, and then they'll get one at the end to get some more points on the board, essentially. I think it's like bookend and book beginning, right? Like that's kind of where they're going to be in terms of their points. And I think Notre Dame not going to put up quite as much as they did against Navy because I don't think they'll get as many turnovers, but I still think they'll put up a good amount of points. I have them putting up 41 offensively. So my final score is Notre Dame 41, Army 6.
41-6. I thought you had a touchdown and some field goals in there, so I was a little confused by what I thought it was going to be 41-13 the way you were laying it out there.
Nope, no touchdown for Army. I think they get 2 field goals.
I've got them scoring 2 touchdowns. I've got Notre Dame winning 38-17. I do think that ultimately things are going to go Notre Dame's way. Like, will we see 1 or 2 plays by it is still notable that for all that Bryson Daly has done this year, his longest run of the season is still just 36 yards. That does surprise me. But like you said, like he is a more physical bowling kind of runner than he is a breakaway type runner, like Aaron Horvath, the Navy quarterback. But I just feel like they're just going to keep pounding it. And if he breaks a couple, they'll find the end zone a couple of times. So I've got 38-17 Notre Dame. All right, well, that is going to do it. Big day coming up Saturday, big doubleheader. We've got Notre Dame women's basketball against USC, 2 ranked teams, and virtually probably what could be a 2028, 2029 WNBA all-star, cast of players out there on the floor Saturday here in Los Angeles. You can see the LA sun beaming in through my window on me.
That Notre Dame and USC game is going to be a part of my rotation this week, and I got IU,
Ohio State at noon.
Sorry, I just got like a tremendous amount of feedback. It'll be Ohio State and IU at noon. It'll be BYU and Arizona State starting at 3:30, and the women's basketball game, of course, going on as well. And then finally, to end the evening, it'll be Notre Dame and Army.
There you go. All right. You can tune in the Odyssey app for any of the Notre Dame broadcasts. Man, that is crazy. I can hear that right now. All right. We'll go ahead and wrap it up with that. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the games. We'll talk to you next week. IB Nation Sports Talk.